The red wine hit my dress like a crimson accusation, spreading across the ivory silk in slow motion, while Isabelle Hartwell's laughter rang out like breaking glass. Around us, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation gala froze for a heartbeat, conversations pausing mid-cadence, champagne flutes suspended halfway to lips, the orchestra's waltz continuing obliviously, while society's elite witnessed what they would later whisper about in powder rooms and private clubs. Oh my goodness, how clumsy of me. Isabelle's voice carried the perfect note of manufactured concern, her hand pressed to her chest in mock horror. But her eyes, her cold blue eyes, sparkled with satisfaction as she surveyed the damage she'd inflicted. I'm so terribly sorry, dear. These old hands just aren't what they used to be. I stood perfectly still, feeling the wine seep through the silk into my skin, warm and sticky and humiliating. The dress had cost me 4 months of savings of vintage Halston I'd found at an estate sale. The kind of piece that whispered old money, even when worn by someone who had none. It was my armor for tonight. My passport into a world where I was supposed to announce the largest arts education grant in the Foundation's history. Don't worry about it, I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the rage building in my chest. Accidents happen. Yes, they do, Isabelle agreed, her smile sharp as a blade. Though some accidents are more revealing than others. The crowd began to shift around us. Some people moving closer to witness the spectacle, others drifting away with the practiced ease of those who'd learned to avoid unpleasant scenes. But I noticed something else, the subtle movement of phones being raised, the discreet positioning of cameras that had been documenting the evening's glamour. The photographers hired to capture the gala's highlights were adjusting their angles. Their lenses now focused on me standing in my ruined dress, while Isabelle Hartwell, the Foundation's most influential board member, played the role of concerned socialite. Perhaps you should go clean up, Isabelle suggested, her voice carrying just loud enough for the nearby microphones to catch. We wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable during your presentation. Though I suppose comfort is relative, isn't it? Some of us are simply more accustomed to these environments than others. The words hit harder than the wine had. I was the Foundation's new director of community outreach, hired 6 months ago to bridge the gap between the arts establishment and the underserved communities they claimed to support. Tonight was supposed to be my moment, the announcement of a $50 million initiative to bring arts education to public schools across the city. Instead, I stood dripping wine and humiliation while cameras captured every second. Actually, I said, my voice growing stronger, I think I'll stay right here. Isabelle's eyebrows rose in surprise. She'd expected me to scurry away, to hide in the bathroom until the stain could be addressed, to remove myself from the elegant tableau she'd worked so hard to maintain. Are you certain? The stain is quite prominent. It is, I agreed, looking down at the spreading crimson across my chest. But then again, so is the truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Margaret Whitmore, the Foundation's president, appeared at my elbow with a concerned expression and a handful of napkins. Alina dear, let's get you sorted out. There's a lovely powder room. No, thank you. I stepped away from her reaching hands, feeling the weight of every gaze in the ballroom. I'm exactly where I need to be. The photographers had moved closer now, their cameras clicking in rapid succession. I could see the calculation in their eyes. This was no longer just a society event to document. This was a story unfolding in real time, and they were positioned to capture every moment. Isabelle's composure flickered for just an instant. Really, dear, there's no need to make a scene. It was simply an accident. And was it? I asked, my voice cutting through her practiced charm. Because, from where I'm standing, it looks remarkably deliberate. The ballroom had gone completely quiet now, even the orchestra trailing off into uncertain silence. 500 of the city's most powerful people stood watching a confrontation that none of them had expected. Their carefully orchestrated evening suddenly transformed into something raw and unpredictable. I beg your pardon. Isabelle's voice had lost its warmth, revealing the steel beneath the silt. You heard me. I turned to face her fully, wine still dripping from my dress onto the polished marble floor. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. A reminder of where you think I belong and where you think I don't. Isabelle's laugh was different now, shorter, sharper, less confident. You're being ridiculous. Why would I deliberately? Because you've been trying to get rid of me since the day I was hired. The words came out clear and strong, carrying across the silent ballroom like a bell. Because you can't stand that the board chose someone from outside your circle, someone who actually understands the communities we're supposed to be serving. The cameras were capturing everything now. Not just the photographers hired for the event, but phones held by guests who sensed they were witnessing something significant. Social media would be buzzing within minutes, the images spreading across platforms faster than wine through silk. That's quite enough, Margaret Whitmore said firmly, stepping between us. Alina, I really think no. I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. It's not enough. It's not nearly enough. I looked around the ballroom, taking in the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some shocked, some calculating the social implications of choosing sides. You want to know what's enough? $50 million to bring arts education to children who've never held a paintbrush or played an instrument. That's enough to change lives, to open worlds, to give kids the same opportunities that everyone in this room takes for granted. Isabelle's mask was slipping now, her carefully maintained composure cracking under the pressure of public scrutiny. This is hardly the time or place for one of your social justice speeches. When is the right time? I demanded. When you're writing checks for tax deductions. When you're posing for photos with underprivileged children you'll never see again, when you're patting yourselves on the back for your charitable contributions while making sure the actual beneficiaries never get close enough to make you uncomfortable. The wine stain had spread across my entire torso now. A scarlet badge of everything that was wrong with this world of careful charity and calculated compassion. But instead of feeling ashamed, I felt something else, a clarity that came from having nothing left to lose. You spilled wine on my dress and laughed, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. You thought you were putting me in my place, reminding me that I'm an outsider who doesn't belong in your world. But you know what? You're absolutely right. Isabelle's eyes widened slightly, uncertainty flickering across her features. I don't belong in a world where charity is performed rather than felt, where helping others is a social obligation rather than a moral imperative, where the people you're supposed to be serving are kept at arm's length so they don't disturb your comfortable assumptions. I looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing that my words would reach far beyond this ballroom. I belong in a world where a child's potential matters more than their zip code. Where art is a right rather than a privilege, where the color of your skin or the size of your bank account doesn't determine whether you deserve beauty in your life. The silence stretched on, heavy with tension and possibility. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came the sound of slow, deliberate applause. I turned to see Dr. James Chen, a pediatric surgeon who volunteered at the community center where I'd worked before joining the foundation. His applause was joined by others, not the polite, measured clapping of social obligation, but something real and sustained. More people joined in, and I realized that not everyone in this room was cut from Isabelle Hartwell's cloth. There were doctors and teachers, social workers, and community leaders. People who understood that true charity required more than writing checks from a comfortable distance. But my attention was fixed on the cameras, on the phones, recording every word. On the photographers whose lenses had captured not just my humiliation, but my response to it. In trying to silence me, Isabelle had given me the largest platform I'd ever had. The wine stain on my dress was no longer a mark of shame. It had become a symbol of something else entirely, the visible proof that some stains reveal more than they conceal. That sometimes the most powerful truths emerge from the messiest moments. As the applause continued and Isabelle Hartwell's face grew pale with the realization of what she'd unleashed, I understood that the evening was far from over. The cameras were still rolling, the story was still unfolding, and somewhere in the city, children were sleeping in beds, surrounded by walls bare of art, dreaming dreams that $50 million could help make real. The question was no longer whether I belonged in this world. The question was whether this world was ready to belong to them. I retreated to the museum's sculpture garden, where marble figures stood sentinel under the October sky, and the city's lights blurred into impressionist smears beyond the glass walls. The wine had begun to dry on my dress, leaving a stiff, uncomfortable reminder of Isabelle's calculated cruelty. But the silence here was different from the shocked quiet of the ballroom. This was the kind of silence that allowed thoughts to settle and truths to emerge. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the gala continuing in my absence. The orchestra had resumed playing, conversations had restarted, and the careful choreography of high society had reasserted itself. But something had shifted in the room's energy. Clusters of guests stood in animated discussion, their body language suggesting debates rather than pleasantries. Phones glowed as people checked social media, their expressions ranging from concern to calculation to barely concealed excitement. The videos are already going viral. I turned to find Marcus Rivera, the foundation's communications director, approaching with 2 cups of coffee and a tablet tucked under his arm. His bow tie was askew, and there was something frazzled about his usually impeccable appearance that suggested the evening had taken an unexpected turn for his department as well. "How viral?" I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. The ceramic was warm against my palms, grounding me in the present moment. 12 million views and climbing. #WeinsteinTruth is trending on 3 platforms. Marcus set his tablet on a nearby bench and ran his hands through his hair. The phones in my office haven't stopped ringing. CNN wants a statement, The Times is asking for an interview, and someone from 60 Minutes just called asking if you'd be available for a segment on inequality in arts funding. I stared at him, the magnitude of what had happened beginning to sink in. 12 million people have watched me get wine thrown on me. They've watched you respond to getting wine thrown on you, Marcus corrected. There's a difference, a big one. He pulled up his tablet, showing me a split screen of videos taken from different angles. Look at this, we've got the initial incident from at least 6 different perspectives. Plus, your entire response captured in high definition. The videos were surreal to watch, seeing myself from the outside, observing the moment when humiliation had transformed into something else entirely. In one shot, taken from behind Isabelle, I could see her face clearly as she realized her plan had backfired spectacularly. In another, captured from the side, the spreading wine stain looked almost artistic against the ivory silk, like a Rorschach test revealing hidden truths. "What are people saying?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Marcus scrolled through comments, his expression growing more animated. "It's incredible, Alina. Listen to this. Finally, someone telling the truth about performative charity. This woman just said what we've all been thinking. The wine stain is the most honest thing at that whole event." He looked up at me with something approaching. You've tapped into something huge here. People are sharing their own stories about being excluded, about charity that serves the giver more than the receiver, about the gap between good intentions and actual impact. Through the windows, I could see Isabelle Hartwell in animated conversation with Margaret Whitmore and several board members. Their body language was tense, defensive, the kind of huddle that suggested damage control rather than celebration. "How is the board reacting?" I asked. "That's complicated." Marcus's expression grew more serious. "Isabelle is pushing for your immediate termination. She's claiming you've embarrassed the foundation, damaged relationships with major donors, created a public relations nightmare. She's got about half the board agreeing with her, and the other half are pointing out that you've generated more positive attention for arts education in 2 hours than we've managed in 2 years. The phones aren't just ringing with media requests, we're getting calls from potential donors, from community organizations wanting to partner with us, from teachers asking how they can get involved with the grant program." Marcus smiled, but it was tinged with uncertainty. You've created a movement, Alina. The question is whether the foundation is brave enough to embrace it. I walked to the window, watching the carefully orchestrated ballet of high society continue in the ballroom. Waiters glided between tables, refilling glasses and clearing plates. Couples moved across the dance floor in perfect synchronization. Everything looked normal, controlled, exactly as it should be. But I could see the undercurrents now, the way conversations stopped when certain people approached, the subtle positioning as alliances formed and reformed in real time. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. Something you should know before you decide what to do next. I turned back to him, noting the hesitation in his voice. The grant announcement, the $50 million for arts educated, not as secure as we've been led to believe. Marcus's words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for too long. The funding is contingent on board approval, and Isabelle has been working behind the scenes to modify the terms. What kind of modifications? She wants to limit the program to schools that meet certain ... criteria. Higher test scores, lower disciplinary incidents, more parental involvement. Essentially, she wants to fund arts education for kids who are already succeeding academically and socially. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. That's not what the grant is supposed to do. It's supposed to reach the kids who need it most, the ones in underfunded schools, the ones who've never had access to arts programs. I know, but Isabelle's argument is that the foundation needs to ensure its investments show measurable results. She says funding programs in struggling schools is too risky, too likely to fail, too difficult to quantify in terms of success metrics. I thought about the children I'd worked with at the community center, kids like Maria, who'd discovered she could sing when someone finally gave her a chance. Like David, whose anger had transformed into poetry when he found words for his pain. Like little Sophia, who'd painted her first picture at age 10 and cried because she'd never known colors could be so beautiful. She's trying to sanitize the program, I said, understanding flooding through me. Make it safe, predictable, designed to succeed with kids who would probably succeed anyway. Exactly. And tonight's incident has given her the ammunition she needs. She's arguing that your outburst proves you're too emotionally invested, too radical, too willing to prioritize ideology over practical results. Through the window, I could see Isabelle gesturing emphatically to the cluster of board members, her perfectly manicured hands cutting through the air like weapons. She was in her element now, using the crisis she'd created to advance an agenda she'd been pursuing all along. When is the board meeting to finalize the grant terms? I asked. Tomorrow morning, emergency session called in response to tonight's events. Marcus's expression was grim. Isabelle is framing it as a choice between responsible stewardship and reckless activism. She's very good at making her position sound reasonable, practical, fiscally responsible, and my position sound naive and dangerous. Pretty much, yeah. I walked back to the bench and sat down, feeling the weight of the evening settling on my shoulders. The wine stain had dried completely now, a permanent reminder of the moment when everything had changed. In trying to humiliate me, Isabelle had inadvertently revealed the fault lines that ran through the foundation's mission, the tension between charity that comforted the giver and charity that challenged the system. Marcus, I said slowly, how many people are watching those videos right now? He checked his tablet again. 18 million and climbing. The hashtag is trending internationally. We're getting media requests from London, Tokyo, Sydney. This has gone way beyond local news. 18 million people who now know that the Metropolitan Arts Foundation is about to make a decision that will determine whether arts education reaches the kids who need it most, or just the kids who are easiest to help. Marcus's eyes widened as he understood what I was thinking. Alina, you can't be serious. Using social media pressure to influence board decisions. That's exactly the kind of thing Isabelle will use to justify firing you. She's going to try to fire me anyway, I pointed out. The question is whether I go quietly or whether I make sure those 18 million people understand what's really at stake here. The board won't appreciate being pressured by public opinion. The board should care more about public accountability than public opinion. I stood up, feeling something crystallize in my chest, not anger anymore, but purpose. Those videos aren't just about me getting wine spilled on my dress. They're about a moment when the mask slipped, when the careful facade of charitable concern revealed the ugly calculations underneath. Through the window, I could see the gala beginning to wind down. Guests were making their way toward the exits, their conversations animated by the evening's unexpected drama. But I also noticed something else. Several people were gathered around phones, showing videos to others, their expressions serious and engaged. The story was spreading beyond social media, becoming part of the real-world conversations that would shape tomorrow's decisions. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. I looked down at my stained dress, at the scarlet reminder of Isabelle's attempt to put me in my place. But the stain no longer felt like a mark of shame. It felt like a badge of authenticity, proof that some truths were worth the mess they created. "I'm going to get ready for tomorrow's board meeting," I said, "and I'm going to make sure those 18 million people understand exactly what the Metropolitan Arts Foundation is really about." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then slowly began to smile. "You know what? I think I'm going to enjoy working with you." As we prepared to leave the sculpture garden, I took one last look at the marble figures standing in their eternal poses, beautiful, perfect, and completely removed from the messy realities of human struggle. Tomorrow, the foundation would have to choose between being a monument to its own virtue or a living force for change. The cameras had captured everything tonight. Now it was time to see what story they would help me tell. I arrived at the foundation's headquarters at dawn. My laptop bag heavy with printed screenshots, financial documents, and the kind of evidence that transforms whispered suspicions into undeniable facts. The building was empty except for security, its marble lobby echoing with the sound of my heels as I made my way to the executive floor. The wine-stained dress from last night hung in my closet at home like a battle flag, replaced now by a simple black suit that felt like armor. The board meeting wasn't scheduled until 10, but I needed time to prepare. More importantly, I needed time to process what Marcus had sent me at 3 in the morning. A collection of emails, budget reports, and internal memos that painted a very different picture of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation's priorities than the one presented to the public. My office overlooked the city's arts district, where murals bloomed on brick walls and small galleries struggled to survive between gentrification and neglect. From my window, I could see the community center where I'd worked before joining the foundation. Its modest building, dwarfed by the gleaming towers of development around it. Somewhere in that building, children were arriving for before-school programs, carrying dreams that $50 million could nurture or neglect, depending on the decisions made in this very room. "You're here early." I turned to find Dr. Amelia Santos, the foundation's newest board member and a professor of arts education at the State University. She carried 2 cups of coffee and wore the kind of expression that suggested she'd been up as late as I had, processing the implications of last night's events. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Too much to think about." "I imagine so. 18 million views is a lot of people watching your life change in real time." Amelia settled into one of the chairs facing my desk, her expression serious but not unsympathetic. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, actually. There's something clarifying about having your worst moment broadcast to the world. It strips away all the pretense, all the careful positioning. You're left with just the truth." "And what truth is that?" I pulled up the documents Marcus had sent me, spreading them across my desk like evidence in a trial. "That the Metropolitan Arts Foundation has been lying to itself and everyone else about what it actually does." Amelia's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation." I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing a spreadsheet that had taken Marcus hours to compile. "Look at this, our funding patterns over the past 5 years. 93% of our grants have gone to schools in affluent neighborhoods, institutions that already have robust arts programs, organizations that serve predominantly white, middle-class populations." Amelia studied the numbers, her expression growing more troubled with each line. These are the schools that least need additional funding. Exactly. But they're also the schools most likely to produce measurable results, positive media coverage, and grateful parents who might become future donors. I pulled up another document. Here's the real revelation: Isabelle Hartwell's criteria for the new grant program. She wants to exclude any school with a free lunch rate above 60%, any district with test scores below the state median, any program that can't guarantee a 90% completion rate. That would eliminate virtually every school that actually needs arts education funding. That's the point. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the community center where children were gathering for their morning programs. Isabelle doesn't want to fund arts education for underprivileged kids. She wants to fund arts education for kids who already have advantages, then take credit for their inevitable success. Amelia was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through the documents with increasing dismay. This is the opposite of what I thought I was joining the board to support. It gets worse. I returned to my desk and pulled up a series of emails between Isabelle and Margaret Whitmore. They've been planning to restructure the grant program for months. Last night's incident just gave them the excuse they needed to accelerate the timeline. The emails were damning in their casual cruelty. Isabelle referred to community-based programs as higher-risk investments and described children from low-income families as challenging demographics with unpredictable outcomes. Margaret's responses were more diplomatically worded but equally revealing. She worried about the foundation's reputation for excellence and the need to maintain donor confidence through strategic targeting of resources. "They're talking about children like their stock portfolios," Amelia said, her voice tight with anger. "Because that's how they see them. Not as human beings with potential, but as variables in an equation designed to maximize the foundation's prestige while minimizing its risk." I pulled up one final document, the foundation's tax filings for the past 3 years. And here's the really interesting part. Look at the administrative costs. Amelia's eyes widened as she processed the numbers. 68% of donations go to administrative expenses. That's unconscionable. Salaries, office space, gala expenses, donor cultivation events. The foundation spends more money on maintaining its image than it does on actually helping children. I closed the laptop, feeling the weight of accumulated evidence. "We're not a charity, Amelia. We're a social club with tax-exempt status." Through my office door, I could see other board members beginning to arrive. Margaret Whitmore swept through the lobby with her usual air of purposeful efficiency, followed by Thomas Blackwood, whose family foundation had been a major donor for decades. Isabelle Hartwell arrived in a chauffeur-driven car, her composure fully restored from last night's momentary crack. "What are you going to do with all this?" Amelia asked, gesturing toward the documents. "I'm going to present it to the board. All of it. The funding patterns, the administrative costs, the emails, the real impact of Isabelle's proposed criteria." I met her gaze steadily. "And then I'm going to ask them to choose who they really want to be. They'll try to discredit you. Claim you're being vindictive, that you're using last night's incident to pursue a personal agenda. Let them try. The numbers don't lie, and neither do the emails." I began gathering the documents into neat stacks. Besides, I'm not the only one with questions about the foundation's direction. Amelia looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Marcus did more than compile financial data last night. He also tracked down some of our former grant recipients, the few community-based programs we've actually funded over the years." I pulled up my phone, showing her a series of text messages. 3 of them are coming to the meeting today. They want to share their experiences with the board. Isabelle will never allow that. Isabelle doesn't get to decide. According to the foundation's bylaws, any board member can request input from grant recipients during policy discussions. I made the request formally at 7 this morning. A knock on my office door interrupted our conversation. Marcus Rivera peered in, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Alina, you need to see this. The story has taken another turn." He handed me his tablet, which displayed a news article from the city's largest newspaper. The headline read, "Weinstein reveals foundation's stained record." Below, it was a photograph from last night, not of the wine being spilled, but of my response, my face determined and defiant as I spoke truth to power. How did they get access to the financial information? I asked, scanning the article. Anonymous source, Marcus said with a slight smile. Someone who believes the public has a right to know how their charitable donations are actually being used. The article was thorough and damning, laying out the same patterns I'd discovered, but with additional context from former employees, rejected grant applicants, and community leaders who'd been shut out of the foundation's programs. It painted a picture of an organization that had lost its way, becoming more concerned with maintaining its elite status than fulfilling its charitable mission. This changes everything, Amelia said, reading over my shoulder. The board can't ignore this level of public scrutiny. They can try, I said, but it's going to be a lot harder to justify their decisions when 18 million people are watching. Through the window, I could see protesters beginning to gather outside the building. They carried signs reading Art for All Kids and End Charity Theater. Teachers, parents, and community activists had organized overnight, mobilizing through the same social media channels that had spread last night's videos. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos, the director of the community center where I'd worked before joining the foundation. We're here, ready to tell our story. I looked at Amelia, then at Marcus, feeling the weight of the moment settling around us. In a few hours, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation's board would make a decision that would determine whether $50 million reached the children who needed it most or just the children who were easiest to help. The wine stain on last night's dress had been more than just a humiliation, had been a revelation, exposing the ugly truth beneath the foundation's beautiful facade. Are you ready for this? Amelia asked. I thought about the children gathering at the community center, about the teachers who'd driven across the city to speak truth to power, about the 18 million people who'd watched a moment of cruelty transform into something larger than any of us had imagined. I've been ready my whole life, I said. I just didn't know it until someone spilled wine on my dress. The board meeting was about to begin, and with it, a reckoning that had been years in the making. The cameras might not be rolling anymore, but the whole world was still watching. The boardroom filled with a tension so thick it seemed to have physical weight. 12 members of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation's board of directors took their seats around the polished mahogany table, their faces carefully composed, but their body language revealing the fault lines that had emerged overnight. At the head of the table, Margaret Whitmore shuffled through her papers with the kind of nervous precision that suggested she was no longer certain who controlled the narrative. Isabelle Hartwell sat to Margaret's right, her silver hair perfectly styled, her navy suit impeccable, her expression radiating the kind of confidence that comes from decades of getting her way. But I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged her notes. The way her eyes avoided the windows where protesters had gathered with their signs and their chants. Before we begin, Margaret said, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. I want to address the events of last evening and their ... aftermath. The foundation has received significant media attention, and we need to discuss how to move forward in a way that protects our reputation and maintains donor confidence. With respect, Margaret. Dr. Amelia Santos interrupted. I think we need to discuss how to move forward in a way that honors our actual mission. Isabel's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Our mission is to provide sustainable, effective arts education funding, not to chase headlines or bow to social media pressure. Our mission, I said, standing and moving to the presentation screen at the front of the room, is to ensure that every child has access to arts education, regardless of their economic circumstances. At least, that's what our charter says. I clicked to the first slide, which displayed the Foundation's official mission statement in large, clear text. Founded in 1987 to democratize access to arts education and ensure that creativity knows no economic boundaries. I looked around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. That's what we tell the public. That's what we tell donors. That's what we tell ourselves. And that's exactly what we do, Isabelle said firmly. Our grants have supported dozens of programs, 93% of which serve affluent communities. I clicked to the next slide, showing the funding analysis Marcus had compiled. Over the past 5 years, we've awarded 127 grants, totaling $42 million. Of those, only 9 grants, 7%, went to schools or programs serving predominantly low-income students. A murmur ran around the table. Several board members leaned forward, studying the numbers with expressions of surprise and concern. "Those numbers are taken out of context," Isabelle protested. "We fund programs based on their likelihood of success, their ability to demonstrate measurable outcomes. We fund programs based on their ability to make us look good," I interrupted, clicking to a slide showing photographs from the Foundation's annual reports. "Look at these images. Every single one shows well-dressed children in well-appointed facilities, playing expensive instruments, working with professional-grade art supplies. These aren't the kids who need our help, these are the kids who already have advantages." Thomas Blackwood, whose family foundation had been a major donor for decades, cleared his throat. "Alina, while I appreciate your passion, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure our investments yield positive returns." Returns for whom? I clicked to the next slide, showing the Foundation's administrative costs. 68% of every dollar donated goes to salaries, office expenses, and donor cultivation events. We spend more money on maintaining our image than we do on actually helping children. The room fell silent, except for the distant sound of chanting from the protesters outside. Margaret Whitmore's face had gone pale, and I could see her calculating the implications of having these numbers exposed to public scrutiny. "There's more," I continued, clicking to a slide showing excerpts from the internal emails Marcus had obtained. "These are communications between board members discussing the proposed grant criteria. I think you'll find them ... illuminating." I read Isabelle's words aloud. "We need to focus on demographics that will produce positive outcomes and grateful families. High-risk populations are simply too unpredictable for our brand positioning." I looked directly at her as I continued. "And here's another gem. Community-based programs attract too much scrutiny and too many complications. Better to fund established institutions with proven track records." Isabelle's composure finally cracked. Those emails were taken out of context. They were private communications about strategic planning. They were honest communications about your real priorities, I said, "which have nothing to do with helping children and everything to do with protecting your reputation." Dr. Santos leaned forward. "Isabelle, is this true? Have you been deliberately steering funding away from the communities that need it most?" "I've been ensuring that the Foundation maintains its standards of excellence," Isabelle replied, her voice rising. "We can't just throw money at every sob story that walks through our doors. We have a responsibility to our donors, to our reputation. We have a responsibility to the children we claim to serve," I interrupted. "And we've been failing them systematically for years." A knock on the boardroom door interrupted the heated exchange. Margaret looked annoyed at the interruption. But Marcus Rivera entered with 3 people I recognized from the community: Center Maria Santos, the program director David Chen, a high school art teacher, and Sofia Rodriguez, a 17-year-old student whose paintings had been featured in the center's gallery. "I'm sorry," Margaret said firmly, "but this is a closed board meeting, actually," Dr. Santos said. Consulting her notes, Alina submitted a formal request this morning to include input from grant recipients in today's policy discussion. According to our bylaws, that request must be honored. Margaret's jaw tightened, but she nodded curtly. "Very well. But please keep your comments brief." Maria Santos stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She was a small woman with graying hair and calloused hands, wearing her best dress for this moment in the spotlight. "My name is Maria Santos, and I run the Eastside Community Arts Center. 3 years ago, you gave us a grant for $15,000, the smallest grant in your annual report that year." Isabelle shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Yes, well, it was an experimental program. That experimental program has served over 300 children," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger. Children who had never held a paintbrush, never played an instrument, never imagined they could create something beautiful. With your $15,000, we bought supplies, hired teaching artists, and opened our doors to kids whose families couldn't afford private lessons or expensive programs. She pulled out a folder of photographs, spreading them across the table. These are some of our students. This is Miguel, who discovered he could sculpt and now has a scholarship to art school. This is Aisha, who wrote her first song in our program and performed it at graduation. This is Carlos, who was failing school until he found poetry and turned his life around. The photographs showed children of all ages working intently on various projects, painting murals, playing instruments, writing in journals, their faces bright with concentration and joy. These were not the polished images from the Foundation's annual reports. These were real children in a real program, creating real art with limited resources and unlimited heart. David Chen stepped forward next. I teach at Roosevelt High School, where 87% of our students qualify for free lunch. We applied for foundation funding 3 times and were rejected each time. The reason given was that our test scores didn't meet your criteria for academic excellence. He pulled out his phone, showing a video of students performing an original musical they'd created. This is what our kids accomplished without your help. They wrote the songs, designed the costumes, built the sets, all while dealing with challenges that most of your funded programs can't imagine. They didn't need perfect test scores to create something beautiful. They just needed someone to believe in them. Finally, Sofia Rodriguez stepped forward. At 17, she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from having survived more than most adults. I'm a senior at Roosevelt High, and I've been part of the community arts program since I was 12. Art saved my life literally. When I was 14, I was in a very dark place, dealing with things at home that I couldn't control. But when I painted, when I drew, I could create something beautiful out of all that pain. She pulled out a portfolio, showing paintings that were raw and powerful, depicting urban landscapes transformed by splashes of color and hope. I'm going to art school next year on a full scholarship. Not because I had advantages, not because I came from the right neighborhood, but because someone gave me a chance to discover what I could do with my hands and my heart. The room was completely silent now. Even Isabelle seemed affected by Sofia's quiet dignity, her obvious talent, her determination to succeed despite the obstacles in her path. The Foundation's proposed criteria would have excluded all of us, Maria said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Our test scores, our demographics, our risk factors, none of us would have qualified for help under the new guidelines. But we're the ones who need it most. We're the ones who will use every dollar to transform lives, not just maintain programs. Margaret Whitmore cleared her throat, her voice uncertain for the first time in the meeting. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. We'll certainly take them into consideration as we move forward. Will you? Sophia asked, her young voice cutting through the diplomatic language like a blade. Because from what I've read in the news, you're about to make a decision that will shut out thousands of kids like me. Kids who don't have perfect test scores or rich parents or safe neighborhoods, but who have dreams and talent and the right to pursue them. She looked directly at Isabelle, her gaze steady and unflinching. You spilled wine on Ms. Elena's dress last night because you thought she didn't belong in your world. But maybe the question isn't whether she belongs in your world. Maybe the question is whether your world deserves to exist if it keeps people like us out. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the windows, the sound of protesters grew louder, their chants echoing off the building's glass walls. Inside the boardroom, 12 powerful people sat with the weight of a 17-year-old's words pressing down on them like a judgment. Isabelle Hartwell, who had controlled foundation policy for nearly a decade, looked smaller somehow, diminished by the truth that had filled the room. Her carefully constructed arguments about risk management and outcome measurement seemed suddenly hollow in the face of Miguel's sculptures, Aisha's songs, Carlos's poetry, and Sofia's paintings. The vote on the grant criteria is scheduled for today, Dr. Santos said, breaking the silence. I move that we postpone that vote until every board member has had a chance to visit the programs we're discussing, not the polished institutions that already have funding, but the community centers and public schools where our mission should actually be fulfilled. Seconded, said James Morrison, a board member who had been quiet throughout the meeting. Margaret looked around the table, seeing nods from several other members. The momentum had shifted, and everyone in the room could feel it. All in favor of postponing the vote pending site visits? Margaret asked. 8 hands rose around the table. Only Isabelle and 3 of her closest allies abstained. Motion carries, Margaret said, her voice heavy with the implications. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks after board members have had a chance to see these programs firsthand. As the meeting broke up and people began filing out of the room, Isabelle Hartwell remained seated, staring at the photographs Maria had left on the table. For a moment, her mask of control slipped completely, revealing something raw and uncertain beneath. "You don't understand," she said quietly, speaking to no one in particular. "Once you let yourself care about them, really care, it changes everything. It makes it impossible to make rational decisions, to maintain necessary distance." To protect the institution's interests, Sofia Rodriguez, who had been gathering her portfolio, paused and looked back at Isabelle. "Maybe that's exactly what this institution needs," she said gently. "Maybe caring too much is better than not caring enough." As the room emptied and the protesters outside began to disperse, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. The wine stain on my dress had been more than just a moment of humiliation, had been a catalyst for a reckoning that was long overdue. The cameras had captured the beginning of the story, but the real ending was still being written, one honest conversation at a time. 2 weeks later, I stood in the Eastside Community Arts Center, watching Isabelle Hartwell attempt to help a 10-year-old named Marcus mix colors for his first oil painting. Her designer suit had been replaced by jeans and a paint-splattered apron. Her perfect manicure now bore traces of cerulean blue, and her carefully maintained composure had given way to something more genuine and infinitely more beautiful. "No, no, Mrs. Isabelle," Marcus said with the patient authority of a child teaching an adult. "You gotta add the yellow real slow, or it gets all muddy. See, like this?" Isabelle watched intently as Marcus demonstrated the technique, her expression one of wonder and concentration. It was the same face I'd seen in the boardroom 2 weeks ago when Sofia Rodriguez had challenged her worldview, but softer now, more open to possibility. "You're absolutely right," Isabelle said, attempting to follow his guidance. "I was being too impatient." "That's okay," Marcus replied generously. "My mom says grown-ups always try to rush things, but art takes time." Around the center, other board members were engaged in similar discoveries. Thomas Blackwood sat in a circle with teenagers, listening to spoken-word poetry that made him wipe his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Dr. Santos worked with a group of middle schoolers on a mural depicting their neighborhood's transformation. Her academic expertise humbled by their lived experience and creative vision. Margaret Whitmore had spent the morning at Roosevelt High School, where she'd watched students perform scenes from a play they'd written about immigration, family, and the American dream. She'd returned to the center visibly shaken, carrying a program signed by every student in the drama club. Elena Maria Santos approached me with a cup of coffee and a smile that had grown more confident over the past 2 weeks. "The board members have been here for 6 hours. I don't think any of them expected to stay this long. What did you expect when you invited them? Honestly, I thought they'd do a quick walkthrough, take some photos for their annual report, and leave. I never imagined they'd actually participate." Maria gestured toward Isabelle, who was now completely absorbed in helping Marcus add highlights to his painting. Especially not her. Through the center's large windows, I could see the neighborhood that had become the unlikely battleground for the foundation's soul. Corner stores with hand-painted signs, apartment buildings where families hung laundry from fire escapes, small businesses that served as community gathering places. It wasn't the polished landscape of the foundation's usual funding recipients. but it was alive with the kind of authentic creativity that money couldn't buy. "The vote is tomorrow," Maria said quietly. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted, but also hopeful. These visits have changed something. You can see it in their faces, hear it in their questions. They're not looking at numbers and demographics anymore. They're seeing actual children with actual dreams. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Rivera. "Media requests are still pouring in. 60 Minutes wants to film the board vote tomorrow. CNN is doing a follow-up segment on charity accountability. The Times wants to write a feature on community-based arts programs." The Weinstein incident had become something larger than any of us had anticipated, a symbol of the gap between performative charity and authentic service, between institutional preservation and transformational change. The videos had been viewed over 50 million times now, spawning countless discussions about wealth, privilege, and the true meaning of philanthropy. Alina Isabelle Hartwell appeared at my side, her hands still stained with paint, her expression uncertain but determined. "Could I speak with you privately?" We walked to a quiet corner of the center, past walls covered with student artwork, vibrant paintings, powerful photographs, sculptures made from recycled materials. Everything here spoke of creativity, born from necessity, beauty emerging from struggle. "I owe you an apology," Isabelle said without preamble. "Not just for the win, though, that was inexcusable, but for everything that led up to that moment. For trying to silence you, for dismissing your perspective, for treating you as a threat rather than an ally. Isabelle, please, let me finish." She took a deep breath, her composure more fragile than I'd ever seen it. "I've spent the past 2 weeks visiting programs I'd previously rejected, meeting children I'd written off as high-risk investments, listening to stories I'd been too afraid to hear, and I've realized something terrible about myself." She paused, looking around at the artwork surrounding us. "I've been so focused on protecting the foundation's reputation that I forgot why we exist in the first place. I turned charity into a performance service, into a social obligation. I became exactly the kind of person who would spill wine on someone's dress to maintain the illusion of control." "What changed?" I asked gently. "Marcus," she said, gesturing toward the 10-year-old, who was now showing his painting to anyone who would look. "When he corrected my painting technique, he wasn't being condescending or dismissive. He was sharing knowledge because he wanted to help me succeed. It was the kind of generous spirit I'd forgotten existed." Isabelle's voice grew softer. "I had a daughter once. She would have been about Marcus's age now. She died in a car accident when she was 7, and I think I've been afraid to care about other children ever since. It felt like a betrayal of her memory, or maybe I was just terrified of experiencing that kind of loss again." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Isabelle, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Of course you didn't. I've spent 15 years making sure no one knew. Building walls around my heart and calling it professional distance." She smiled sadly. "But watching these children today, seeing their joy and creativity and resilience, I realized that Emma would want me to love them, not fear them. She would want her death to inspire life, not prevent it." Through the center's windows, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Children were walking home from school, their backpacks heavy with homework and dreams, their voices carrying on the wind like promises of tomorrow. "The vote tomorrow," Isabelle continued, "I want you to know that I'll be supporting the original grant proposal, full funding for community-based programs, with criteria based on need rather than prestige. It's what Emma would want, and it's what these children deserve." "What about the other board members?" "Thomas has already committed to supporting the proposal. Margaret is wavering, but I think today's visits will push her in the right direction. The others... Isabelle shrugged. "We'll see, but I think we have the votes we need." A commotion near the center's entrance drew our attention. Sofia Rodriguez had arrived with a group of high school students, carrying canvases and paint supplies for an evening workshop. She spotted us and approached with the confident stride of someone who had found her voice and wasn't afraid to use it. Ms. Alina, Mrs. Hartwell, she said, nodding to each of us in turn. How did the board visits go today? Eye-opening, Isabelle replied. Your paintings, the ones you showed us in the boardroom, they've been haunting me for 2 weeks. The way you captured both pain and hope in the same image. It's extraordinary. Sophia smiled, but her expression remained serious. Art saved my life. Not just because it gave me a scholarship opportunity, but because it taught me that I could transform my pain into something beautiful. Something that might help other people feel less alone. That's exactly what we want the grant program to support, I said. Not just art education, but art as transformation, art as healing, art as a bridge between different worlds. Speaking of bridges, Sophia said, pulling out her phone, I wanted to show you something. Remember the video of you responding to the wine incident? It's been translated into 12 languages and shared by arts organizations around the world. You've inspired similar conversations in London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, the wine stain heard round the world. I looked at the phone screen, seeing comments in languages I couldn't read, but emotions I could understand. People sharing their own stories of exclusion and inclusion, of charity that helped and charity that harmed, of the difference between giving and serving. It's incredible, Isabelle said, reading over my shoulder. You've started a global conversation about the purpose of philanthropy. We've started it, I corrected. This isn't just about one moment or one person. It's about a fundamental question. Are we going to use our resources to maintain existing hierarchies, or are we going to use them to create new possibilities? As the evening workshop began and the center filled with the sounds of creativity and collaboration, I realized that the wine stain on my dress had become something I'd never expected, a window into a different way of being in the world. Isabelle's attempt to humiliate me had instead illuminated the choice we all face between protecting our comfort and serving our purpose. The board vote was tomorrow, and with it, the decision about whether $50 million would reach the children who needed it most. But regardless of that outcome, something irreversible had already happened. The mask had slipped, the truth had emerged. And a community of people committed to authentic change had formed around a shared understanding that beauty belongs in every corner of the world, Alina, Isabelle said, as we prepared to leave the center. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that you've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? The ability to hope. She looked around the center one last time, taking in the artwork, the laughter, the sense of possibility that filled every corner. Emma would have loved this place. She would have loved these children, and she would have been proud that her mother finally learned to love them too. As we walked out into the evening air, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from a moment of cruelty to a community of care, from a wine stain to a window of opportunity. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and choices. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of what was possible when people chose courage over comfort, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The next morning, I arrived at the foundation headquarters to find a crowd gathered outside, not protesters this time, but supporters. Teachers, parents, students, and community leaders had come to witness the board vote. Their presence a reminder that this decision would ripple far beyond the marble walls of institutional power. Sofia Rodriguez stood near the entrance with a group of her classmates holding a banner that read "Art for All" in multiple languages. When she saw me, she smiled and held up her phone. 63 million views, she called out. The wine stain that changed the world. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was different from 2 weeks ago. The tension remained, but it was the productive tension of people grappling with important questions rather than the defensive tension of people protecting their positions. The photographs from the community center visits were displayed on easels around the room, images of board members working alongside children, learning from them, being transformed by them. Margaret Whitmore called the meeting to order, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. We're here to vote on the criteria for the $50 million arts education grant. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the past 2 weeks have been educational for all of us. Thomas Blackwood nodded. I've been on this board for 12 years, and I thought I understood our mission. But visiting Roosevelt High School, seeing what those students accomplished with so little support, it made me realize we've been measuring success by the wrong metrics. Dr. Santos leaned forward. The question isn't whether these programs will produce perfect outcomes. The question is whether we have the courage to invest in human potential, even when it's messy and unpredictable. Isabelle Hartwell sat quietly for a moment, then stood and walked to the window overlooking the crowd below. 2 weeks ago, I would have argued that our responsibility was to minimize risk, maximize efficiency, and protect the foundation's reputation. Today, I want to argue for something different. She turned back to the room, her expression calm but determined. I want to argue for the kind of courage that a 17-year-old girl showed when she looked me in the eye and asked whether our world deserved to exist if it kept people like her out. I want to argue for the wisdom of a 10-year-old boy who taught me that art takes time and patience. I want to argue for the vision of community leaders who see possibility where we've only seen problems. The room was completely silent, the weight of her words settling over the assembled board members like a benediction. I move that we approve the original grant proposal without modification, Isabelle continued. $50 million for community-based arts education programs, with criteria based on need rather than prestige, with funding going to the schools and organizations that serve the children who need us most. Seconded, Dr. Santos said immediately. All in favor? Margaret asked. 10 hands rose around the table. Only 2 members abstained, and even they looked uncertain about their choice. Motion carries, Margaret announced, and the room erupted in applause that could be heard through the windows to the crowd below. As board members began filing out to address the media, Isabelle approached me one final time. The wine stain, she said quietly. It's gone now, isn't it? From your dress? The dry cleaner worked miracles, I replied. But the memory remains, the lesson. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it reached her eyes. Sometimes the most beautiful transformations begin with the messiest moments. Through the windows, I could see Sofia Rodriguez being interviewed by a news crew, her voice carrying clearly as she spoke about art, opportunity, and the power of believing in young people's potential. Behind her, the banner fluttered in the morning breeze. Art for all. The wine stain was gone, but its impact would last forever. In trying to put me in my place, Isabelle had inadvertently created space for a larger truth to emerge. That authentic charity requires authentic vulnerability, that real change demands real courage, and that sometimes the most powerful responses come not from fighting back, but from standing still and speaking truth. As I prepared to leave the building and begin the work of implementing the grant program, I thought about Emma Isabelle's daughter and how proud she would be to know that her mother had finally learned to love without fear. The $50 million would change thousands of lives, but the real transformation had already begun in a boardroom where powerful people chose to become vulnerable, where wine stains became windows, and where a whispered cruelty had blossomed into a chorus of hope. The cameras had captured the moment, but the movement would last forever.